Today on Jay Sekulow Live, night 3 of the RNC, and we've got one of the RNC speakers, former acting director of national intelligence, Ric Grenell, joins us today on Jay Sekulow Live.
Live from Washington, D.C., Jay Sekulow Live. Phone lines are open for your questions right now. Call 1-800-684-3110. That's 1-800-684-3110. And now, your host, Jordan Sekulow.
Welcome to Jay Sekulow Live, a very special broadcast today. But first, let me say, before we start covering night 3 of the Republican National Convention, our prayers are with all of those being affected by Hurricane Laura right now. And, of course, as it continues to cause devastation, not just on the coast, but as it moves up through the country. We're just getting the initial reports now. We'll keep covering it, of course, keep our eyes on it for the broadcast and for our listeners as we need to. But last night, we have someone joining us today, as you know, who spoke last night at the Republican National Convention. And that is the former acting director of national intelligence, Ric Grenell, former ambassador, U.S. ambassador to Germany. Check this out.
President Donald Trump appoints to a G7 country Ric Grenell.
Historic moment, nearly a year in the making for U.S. Ambassador to Germany, Richard Grenell.
Obviously, you served many years at the United Nations, so you come at this with a depth of knowledge and experience. You're ready to go.
When you work at the UN and you see the world the way it is, you're reminded that when it comes to liberty and human rights and a whole bunch of issues, we're on the same page.
In addition to being the ambassador to Germany, when Andrew Brunson was released from prison in Turkey, and finally got out of Turkish airspace and landed in Germany at 2:30 in the morning, who met him at the airport with an American flag? Ambassador Ric Grenell.
They're rushing us to the airport. There was an Air Force plane that came from Germany that had been on standby.
My wife and I came down the stairs of the plane, and there was somebody waiting for us. And I found out that it was Richard Grenell, and he was standing there with an American flag and handed it to me and said, "Welcome home." So grateful for all that my country had done for me.
Our allies are dying to see an action plan. They're hungry for U.S. leadership.
Then Ric Grenell becomes the acting director of national intelligence.
My next guest did more to expose government corruption than most Washington insiders have done in years.
And he has the guts and the timidity to unleash and unmask the unmaskers, so to speak.
We do now know, though, why the acting DNI, Ric Grenell, was over at the Department of Justice last week. It was to deliver a declassified list of names of Obama administration officials who were behind the unmasking of General Michael Flynn after Flynn was picked up during the presidential transition.
As acting director of national intelligence, I saw the Democrats' entire case for Russian collusion. And what I saw made me sick to my stomach. The Obama-Biden administration secretly launched a surveillance operation on the Trump campaign and silenced the many brave intelligence officials who spoke up against it.
Transparency is never political. Transparency is what the American people demand, and it's what Washington, D.C. is very uncomfortable with.
And folks, we are very excited to announce that Ric Grenell, former acting director of national intelligence, is joining the American Center for Law and Justice, ACLJ, as special advisor for national security and foreign policy.
Yeah, this is something we're really excited about, and I've known Ric for many years, and I have been an admirer of what he's done, what he continues to do, and the service he's given to our country. In just a few moments after we come back from the break, we're going to be joined by former director and former Ambassador Grenell. But let me just say this. You know people by the actions that they take. And I have seen Ric, and I will tell you, Andrew Brunson is the perfect example for me of where Ric's heart is as it relates to helping people in need. This was, of course, our case where he was in jail for 2.5 years, and at 2:30 in the morning, there was our ambassador to Germany with an American flag. It's indelibly marked in my head, but also in my heart. And I want to tell you something. We're looking forward to having Ric is part of our team. He's going to add a lot of information for our audience in the coming months, and we're really excited about that, especially as these issues are going to be front and center. We're going to be joined by Ambassador Grenell in just a moment right after the break. Jordan?
Yep. So, again, if you want to, share this with your friends and family. He's going to be joining us via Skype, so you can see him on video, too.
back to the broadcast, everyone. And as I said, we are now joined by the former acting director of national intelligence and former ambassador to Germany, our friend, Ric Grenell. I can now say our colleague, Ric Grenell, as he is going to serve as a senior advisor to the ACLJ, especially on issues involving national security and foreign policy. Ric, it is a thrill to have you with us. We're so glad you're joining us.
Yeah, thank you. I just have one rule for you guys, which is you have to call me Rick.
Well, we will call you Rick, but I will tell you this. I do this. This is kind of called habit. You know, it's just habit. But we will call you Rick. But we are always going to acknowledge the service you've given the country and the appropriate titles you have. But we'll call you Rick, and I know our audience will be glad to know that as well. Let me say this. I want to play for you something that you said yesterday that I have some familiarity with, to say the least. But I want to get your comments on this. Let's go ahead and roll this. This involves the collusion narrative.
As acting director of national intelligence, I saw the Democrats' entire case for Russian collusion. And what I saw made me sick to my stomach. The Obama-Biden administration secretly launched a surveillance operation on the Trump campaign and silenced the many brave intelligence officials who spoke up against it. They presented bogus information as facts. They lied to judges. Then they classified anything that undermined their case.
You know, Rick, as you know, and I lived that case for 3.5 years representing the president and still represent the president, but in that matter, of course, I lived it. And I found that it was unbelievable what we uncovered, but that the government, those in the government, not everybody, of course, but those in the government were actually doing this. And you served, of course, when you were acting DNI, you saw it firsthand. What was going on here? What was the takeout attempt here?
Look, when the Democrats say, you know, there was some smoke, there was some suspicion, so we had to look into this and see if the Trump campaign was talking to Russia. You know, I'm all for our government being, thorough, right? So I take them at their word that in the beginning that they had some suspicions. But Jay, I got to tell you, when you look at the evidence, quickly there were career Foreign Service officers who said, this is baloney, this is not true, the Russians are playing propaganda. The warnings from inside the intelligence community were real and prominent. And yet we had leaders of DOJ and the FBI and CIA that were willing to push away and classify those warnings and silence those warnings because they had an agenda. They weaponized government and they overruled those who warned. You just got to look at two things. Look at all of the declassified footnotes from the reports which talk about the warnings, which talk about individuals. There's also reports that still need to come out that highlight individuals, career officials who gave early warnings and who were silenced and pushed away. Those reports still need to come out. And I would say lastly is even the political people that were briefed. When you look at what they said on CNN and MSNBC, it's dramatically different than what they said under oath in the bowels of Congress during a House committee meeting. It's there. You can go to the DNI website. You can read the transcript from Susan Rice and from Samantha Power and all these individuals who in public would say this is, outrageous collusion. And then in private, they would say, I didn't see anything. There's nothing illegal. So, lastly, I'll just say Susan Rice sent an email to herself on Inauguration Day trying to say, we did everything by the book. Now, come on. Who sends after the fact emails to say I did everything that I was supposed to do? You only do that when you're thinking, oh gosh, I don't think I did everything I was supposed to do, so I better paper over something for the record. We all know that to be true. That's exactly what happened. We just got lucky in that she literally sent the email when Trump was already president. After 12 o'clock on Inauguration Day, she was still sitting in the White House. And at 12:15, the email shows that she sent an email to herself under the Trump presidency, not under the Obama presidency. And that's how we got it, is that she was still in her office and sending emails to herself. after the transition of power had happened.
Jordan?
Rick, last night you talked about Joe Biden's record as a politician. I want to play this for people. You talked about how many years he's had, and this idea of new ideas coming from Joe Biden. Take a listen, folks. This is Rick last night at the RNC.
Every time Joe Biden offers a new idea, you should ask yourself, why didn't he try that over the last 48 years?
And then, Rick, you talked about, too, like, is it going to be a return back to just sending pallets of cash to Iran? And Joe Biden's promised he's going to restart the Iranian nuclear deal. How dangerous is that? I mean, you were the ambassador to Germany. They were concerned about that. You were also acting DNI. I mean, how dangerous would just that old way of thinking, it's not a new idea, of just going back to the same and restarting a nuclear deal with Iran, and also this idea that Joe Biden somehow is going to have new ideas after he's been a politician for 48 years?
Yeah, look, it's the Washington way. It's the Washington story, right? I mean, you look at Schumer, you look at Pelosi, they've been there for decades. And so, the idea that they're going to bring change to this place or new ideas is ridiculous. That's just not going to happen. And I keep saying to people, this city, Washington, D.C., where I am, it's no longer a fight between Republicans and Democrats. It is a fight between the Washington status quo people who love their power, want to hide information from the American people because when they control the information, they get power. It's them versus the rest of America. And this is the same old story in Europe. It's the Berlin establishment versus the rest of Germany and the hardworking Germans. And so it's over and over and over again. I think it's the same old elites. And of course, they get their power and they want to control it. Lastly, I'll just say about Joe Biden's foreign policy. The word consensus sounds really good, right? It sounds like, it's, agreeable. But in foreign policy, I can tell you after 8 years of being at the UN inside the Security Council, if you're looking for consensus, that means 15 countries get to veto our idea, and we have the lowest common denominator of what we all believe. And so Joe Biden's foreign policy philosophy is governed by consensus. We're not going to do anything unless the Europeans sign off. And so you know what that means is that Berlin, Paris, and London get to veto what Washington says. If we have an idea and they don't like it, we don't do it. That's what gave us the Paris Climate Accord, and it gave us the JCPOA. Both of them are documents that are the lowest common denominator of what a bunch of countries think, and it is not good for the American people. We are the only country in the world that gets in trouble when we decide that we want to make decisions for ourselves. I can tell you the 192 countries at the UN that I spent 8 years with, every one of them fights for themselves and for their people, and they don't apologize for it.
You brought up, Rick, this is Logan, by the way, hello. You brought up working with the UN, working with Germany, but you also last night spent a lot of time on America First and the America First platform, which is important to us and our listeners and the listeners of my show, the Reprogram. For you, though, having to take that point of view and then work with Germany, work with the UN, what is that like, and how do you represent, sort of like you said, sort of the nationalist point of view, as you brought up last night, to all of those other places throughout the world?
That's a great question, especially coming from you, because I have more of a style like you do. I hate wearing ties. You'll notice I don't wear ties. I'm begging Jay to let me wear T-shirts when I come on.
But I do with a sport coat, but go ahead.
Okay, well, we'll see. Look, I think you got to be authentic when it comes to diplomacy. I never wore a tie in Germany. Very few times have I met with, the chancellor or something. But there were times that I just wanted to be myself. I wanted to be casual diplomat. And authentic and real, and have a conversation and share what the U.S. position is. We live in modern times. You can read what our policy is on Twitter or on Instagram. And so I think the answer is be authentic, be yourself. Don't try to be something that you're not. And also always remember you represent the American people, not just Washington, D.C.
Rick, I want to say again how excited and encouraged we are to have you as part of our team, especially as a special advisor on national security issues and foreign policies. There'll be a lot of those in the months ahead, weeks ahead. And again, a great job last night. Great job over your career, but a really great job last night. You delivered hard lines in a very effective way. And I just was thrilled that. And thanks for joining us. It's going to be great. Look forward to talking to you next week and the weeks to come. Yeah. Very good. Jordan?
Thank you.
Thank you, Rick.
Thanks, Rick. And again, folks, Rick will be joining us throughout the broadcasting. So, throughout each week, he'll be writing some for ACLJ as well. So you would check that out. That'll be exclusive content for the ACLJ website. So it's great to have Rick on board. Rick,
let me say one other thing, and that is, look, these issues that Ric Grenell has dealt with for many years, decades, are going to be the front and center issues that our country's facing in the weeks, months, and years ahead. So getting this kind of expertise and being able to bring that to our audience, we're just thrilled to have Ric Grenell as, I will call him, former acting director and ambassador, at least for this closing, to be part of the team.
All right, so Rick, we'll see you next week, all right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, Rick.
Folks, we'll be right back on Jay Sekulow Live. We'll be taking your phone calls, 1-800-684-3110, and analyzing Night 3 of the RNC.
President Donald Trump appoints to a G7 country Ric Grenell.
Historic moment, nearly a year in the making for U.S. Ambassador to Germany, Richard Grenell.
Obviously, you served many years at the United Nations, so you come at this with a depth of knowledge and experience. You're ready to go.
When you work at the UN and you see the world the way it is, you're reminded that when it comes to liberty and human rights and a whole bunch of issues, we're on the same page.
In addition to being the ambassador to Germany, when Andrew Brunson was released from prison in Turkey, and finally got out of Turkish airspace and landed in Germany at 2:30 in the morning, who met him at the airport with an American flag? Ambassador Ric Grenell.
They're rushing us to the airport. There was an Air Force plane that came from Germany that had been on standby.
My wife and I came down the stairs of the plane, and there was somebody waiting for us, and I found out that it was Richard Grenell, and he was standing there with an American flag and handed it to me and said, "Welcome home." So grateful for all that my country had done for me.
Our allies are dying to see an action plan. They're hungry for U.S. leadership.
Then Ric Grenell becomes the acting director of national intelligence.
My next guest did more to expose government corruption than most Washington insiders have done in years.
And he has the guts and the timidity to unleash and unmask the unmaskers, so to speak.
We do now know, though, why the acting DNI, Ric Grenell, was over at the Department of Justice last week. It was to deliver a declassified list of names of Obama administration officials who were behind the unmasking of General Michael Flynn after Flynn was picked up during the presidential transition.
Transparency is never political. Transparency is what the American people demand, and it's what Washington, D.C. is very uncomfortable with.
Welcome back to Jay Sekulow Live. So we're going to get into, that was great to have, and to announce to you that not only was Ric Grenell our guest, former acting director of national intelligence, a cabinet member in the Trump administration, and former U.S. ambassador to Germany, not only was our guest today, but we had a special announcement for all of you, and that he is going to join the ACLJ as a special advisor for national security and foreign policy. And I just want to let you know, we're able to bring in people like this, so he'll be regularly on the broadcast, even by video. For those of you who watch the Facebook and Periscope broadcast, he was via Skype, so you can see it as well. And he'll be writing at least once a week exclusive content for the ACLJ. So exclusive for you. We're able to do all of that because you support the work of the ACLJ. We're able to bring these experts in so that we can bring them to you, especially during this heightened time during an election year, leading up to 2 months
Especially
out.
with these policies. These are going to be the big issues that the country, the foreign
Huge
policy,
issues.
of course, you got the domestic issues, which we know, but the foreign policies are going to be big.
Oh, with the
because they're
Durhams out there and all that stuff. I mean,
Yep.
So I think this is just a reminder. Your support for the ACLJ during a matching challenge month is the reason why we can bring on a former cabinet official as a special advisor to the ACLJ.
Yeah.
And bring them and get them to be on the broadcast for you and get you up to speed on this. So, again, it was great to have Rick and welcome him to our team as well.
Yeah, and so your support of the ACLJ makes a huge difference. Let me bring in two of our experts, also additional experts. That is Professor Harry Hutchison, our Director of Policy, and our Senior Counsel, Andy Economo. I want to start with a question first, and we'll get to some other things, and that is one of the things, Andy, I'm going to give this one to you, Andy, that I talked to Rick about was when Rick mentioned that when he became the acting DNI, he saw firsthand exactly what was going on, and it was a counterintelligence effort against the campaign, and they secretly launched the surveillance of this counterintelligence investigation, and it continued while he was president. And we know that from our experience in dealing with Bob Mueller and his team for 2.5 years.
That's right, Jay. What the purpose of the Bob Mueller investigation was, as the president said from the very beginning, a hoax, an attempt to tie him in with Russia in colluding to effect and to influence the presidential election. We knew that 18 prosecutors couldn't find anything, and for 2.5 years literally tortured the president of the United States and wasted the taxpayers' money, millions and millions of dollars, in a hunt for something that didn't exist. Ric Grenell comes in here, unmasks the people who participated in this, and confirms what we knew all along and what Robert Mueller tried to hide, and that is that there was no collusion and there was absolutely nothing that the president of the United States had done wrong, that the Obama administration had weaponized the FBI, had weaponized the Justice Department to spy on the campaign of his opponent, and to make up a story that we now have exploded into mythology.
And Harry, I was going to ask you this. I know you watched last night, but one of the other things that Rick talked about was that putting America first is not something that we should be ashamed to do. In fact, he said in dealing at the UN, don't kid yourself, all of those countries are putting their leadership first. It's just our policies have sometimes taken a more of a consensus approach, which I believe was detrimental to America. What's your view on that and what you heard yesterday from Ric Grenell?
Well, I think Ric Grenell was absolutely correct. Counterintelligence officials are basically elites. They're part of a permanent bureaucracy who prefer to demean the intelligence of ordinary Americans. They seek to install themselves as permanent leaders of the republic, contrary to the text of the Constitution. Many of them are globalists. And what that means in practice is that the United States must take second place, and American interests must take second place to the interest of globalists. And President Trump has ended that approach, and he has offered an America First approach that puts American working people ahead of working people in every other country in the world. That is appropriate. This is the United States. This is not the United Nations.
Appreciate that, Harry. Jordan, from your perspective, we watched now 3 days of, 3 days of the convention. The fourth day is going to be today. The president's going to, at least the plan is to make the speech tonight. What was your biggest takeaway from last night? Not just Rick's. I mean, Rick's we've covered that, but what else did you just take away thematically?
I think you see thematically a Republican Party which is much more diverse than gets portrayed by the mainstream media. You have people from many different backgrounds. Obviously, there's different themes each night. So this was a night focusing in on a lot of national security talk, foreign policy talk, and ending, of course, with a major speech from the vice president, which we'll get into in the second half hour as well. He being the keynote speaker, making the case for why he and President Trump deserve another 4 years in office to continue out their policies. And I think what we are starting to hear now, there's criticism early on. It was like, well, what do you plan to do for the next 4 years? And a lot of this criticism was happening in the beginning of COVID. And, I think that saying things about exactly what you're going to do in the next 2 months or, in January and March were a little more difficult. Now we're starting to hear from the administration those steps it's going to take. You heard from Mike Pence. I don't know if we have time to play it now. His direct response back to Joe Biden on miracles, and the fact that, but that idea that they now are moving forward saying we're going to get past COVID and we're going to get back to those policies to put America's economy, which it already is, back on top.
We do have it.
But keep it that way. And let's play it for people. I think this was an important takeaway.
Last week, Joe Biden said that no miracle is coming. Well, what Joe doesn't seem to understand is that America is a nation of miracles. And I'm proud to report that we're on track to have the world's first safe, effective coronavirus vaccine by the end of this year.
It's there between how people see miracles. See, I think with people of real faith, using your brain in science
is a miracle.
But being able to do it in a quick way, that if that works out that way, that by January is still a miracle. That America's founding, that we were able to beat the largest army in the world, the British Empire, was a miracle. Yes, people used their brains. They lost their lives. They fought. They risked it all. But it was a miracle that America was born. It was a miracle that America could come back together after the Civil War. It was a miracle that throughout all these conflicts, America has continued to thrive. Have there been low points? Sure, but there have been a lot of high points. And I think that is the key difference when you look at how these politicians look at things. Our current president and vice president and our former vice president. One who thinks it all has to be done by the government and by people, and that there's no higher power at play. And I think when you do that, you're going into some dangerous, scary territory.
I agree, and I've been saying that. I've used that example a lot, and I just thought last night it was just fantastic. And again, for those that are just joining us here at the end of this broadcast, we're going to have, of course, another half hour. We're happy to announce that Ric Grenell is joining us as a special advisor, specifically dealing with the issues of national security and foreign policy. And that he will be joining our expert team, and we're glad of that. Also, your support of the ACLJ makes all of this possible. Bringing you these experts, two you're just hearing from right now, Harry and Andy, and so many others, Wes Smith. Your support of the ACLJ in this last days of the matching challenge make a big difference. ACLJ.org if you're able. Back with more in a moment.
One of the practice areas that we've been able to develop is Freedom of Information Act requests, or FOIA requests.
It's thousands of pages of paper, and in those thousands of pages of paper, you usually find a nugget.
Government agencies acting out of control.
We have exposed that in our FOIA litigation, and we do that every day that we bring these cases.
It is your statutory right as an American citizen to have access to documents that reveal how the government is functioning, how your government is functioning.
We took it to the IRS. No one ever does that.
What the IRS was doing was violating the Constitution and statutory law. They can't do what they were doing before.
They've been hiding behind in the shadows. These FOIAs bring them to light.
How do we know? Because our FOIA litigation got that document.
Those of you that support the ACLJ, this is what it's all about at the end of the day.
It's all because of you. And you can double the impact your donation today at aclj.org. Go online and donate now.
Live from Washington, D.C., Jay Sekulow Live. And now, your host, Jordan Sekulow.
Hey, welcome back to Jay Sekulow Live in our second half hour. If you're just joining us, just so you know, there was some news made on the show today, and that is that a former acting director of national intelligence, that's a cabinet-level position in the Trump administration, Ric Grenell, has joined the American Center for Law and Justice as a special advisor for national security and foreign policy, be appearing on the broadcast, and you'll get to actually see him via Skype. And he'll be writing once a week for ACLJ.org, exclusively for you. For that won't be content that'll be anywhere else but the ACLJ's website.
Yeah, and look, as these issues, the foreign policy issues and national security issues are going to be the forefront, certainly during the next 8 weeks in this election, but also going forward. So bringing an expert that served in the cabinet, we've had that privilege with John Ashcroft, and this is great also.
Yeah, because it was a reminder last night. A lot of these reminders, I know you're about to place some other speakers' reminder, of how much this first term has been attempted to be undermined by that intelligence community that Rick oversaw.
Yeah.
He oversee when you're acting DNI, you oversee every single branch of the intelligence. And he saw, and for 3 years, basically, they tried to put the Trump administration on its heels.
No question.
And the president was still able to accomplish a lot domestically, economically, and when it came to foreign policy, but not without a lot of pain and suffering for the country.
Oh, and a lot of work for his lawyers, and a lot of pressure that puts
on
the president. But he did a great job. Now, Lieutenant General Kellogg spoke last night. I've gotten to work with him. I am an admirer of General Kellogg. He is basically the national security advisor for the vice president. He made an interesting point. I want everybody to listen to it. I'm going to get our experts' comments.
Over the past 3.5 years, I have witnessed every major foreign policy and national security decision by the president. I have been in the room where it happened. I saw only one agenda and one guiding question when tough calls had to be made. Is this decision right for America?
So, Harry, I'm going to start with you. From a policy standpoint, we've always taken the position, is this right for America? Is this right for our citizens? That has to be the starting point, doesn't it?
Absolutely. But it has not always been the starting point. And so that is what is so starkly different about President Trump. He is actually putting America's interests first, while globalists like former President Barack Obama, they were prepared to give money to terrorists in order to secure, for instance, the Iranian nuclear deal. This makes no sense. And so here you have a president who took out al-Baghdadi, who took out Qasem Soleimani, who took out ISIS essentially in the Middle East, while President Barack Obama in 2014 suggested that ISIS was simply the JV team, the junior varsity team. So President Trump is consistently looking out for American interest, and he is acting upon that principle.
All right, so Andy, I want to finish this segment up because we're going to get into some other issues, but I want to finish this one up. Ambassador Grenell did say this. Rick did say this, and that he saw a counterintelligence move against a presidential campaign. That's how he summed it up with less than a minute to go.
Right. And he was right, Jay, because it was a counterintelligence move spearheaded by the Obama Justice Department and the Obama FBI. It was an attempt to undermine the President of the United States, both as a candidate and, let's not forget, in the transition. They sent people in there to try to get Flynn to lie or to get him to say something that wasn't the case without counsel, and it was a concerted effort to undermine the president's administration. Why don't we say that? Why doesn't the media say that? Because they're scared to tell the truth. America first.
Yeah, there you go. All right, we're taking a break. When we come back, we're more of your calls and also more discussion.
All right, folks, remember, too, Night 4 concludes with the president. More speakers tonight as well. I think already I'd love to get your phone calls to 1-800-684-3110. What do you think of these first 3 days? I know some attention will be on the hurricane throughout the day, rightfully so, to see the impact of that on the country. But this is Night 4 when the president speaks, the biggest night coming up. Folks, of course, we're going to take your phone calls, 1-800-684-3110. What are your thoughts on the RNC, the convention so far, in contrast to the DNC last week? I mean, I think first off, it's just production quality. It's been interesting visually to watch. So if you're someone who was going to tune in, it kept,
even CNN saying that.
It kept your attention. Yeah. And like it or not, remember, it's the Democrats who are the Hollywood party. They have all the Hollywood, and yet obviously Hollywood thought it would be they were acting too PC, so they wanted to like tone it down. But when your whole thing is virtual and on television, toning it down, having John Kasich look up, at a drone and him doing it himself, maybe a little too toned down for when you're nominating a person to lead the free world, and some of that pomp and you need, because you're talking about, you want to make people understand what they're listening to and what they're thinking about here as they make their decision for November. Is you're deciding who is going to lead the U.S. military, lead the U.S. Law enforcement, lead the economy, enact the legislation, actually sign things into law, appoint Supreme Court justices, declare wars. I mean, think about that. Decide when to send troops into action. All of that. So, yeah, I think it should look good. If you can't do it at an in-person convention like normal, the fact that the Democrats thought that by being PC and kind of toning it down, it just makes it too hard to watch. Also, they were just dull. And they're supposed to be the party of diversity. Well, Dad, it was interesting because last night, yet again, we had Vernon Jones from
DeKalb County, who we knew.
Yes, who's a state house member in Georgia,
Democrat.
A Democrat who's endorsed President Trump. He spoke last night. He's taken a lot of heat from the Democrat Party at the state level trying to throw him out and national level. But last night, another
Clarence
major
Henderson.
African-American civil rights leader.
One of the Greensboro sit-in boys. I mean, that's what they call them. These are the guys that did the sit-ins. And Clarence Henderson has a 60-year history. When, as a young man, he participated in a sit-in in the segregated North Carolina, did a lunch counter sit-in. His fellow protesters were arrested. It sparked similar protests. I mean, a lot of it started in Greensboro. He spoke out, and this is someone that was at the heart of the civil rights movement in the South in the 60s, early 60s, 1960. And he spoke out and delivered truth. I want everyone on our radio broadcast, listening on our social media platforms, to listen to this.
And you know what else? I'm a Republican, and I support Donald Trump. If that sounds strange, you don't know your history. It was the Republican Party that passed the 13th Amendment, abolishing slavery. It was a Republican Party that passed the 14th Amendment, giving black men citizenship. It was the Republican Party that passed the 15th Amendment, giving black men the right to vote. Freedom of thought is a powerful thing.
I want to read. Can I read again what he said? I want to reiterate what he said. He said, "If that sounds strange," because he said he's a Republican and he's voting for Donald Trump. And again, Clarence Henderson was a leading civil rights figure. He was in the sit-ins in Greensboro, North Carolina, which really sparked the nation. And he said, let me give you a history lesson, basically. It was the Republican Party that passed the 13th Amendment abolishing slavery. It was the Republican Party that passed the 14th Amendment giving black men citizenship. It was the Republican Party that passed the 15th Amendment giving black men the right to vote. Freedom of thought is a powerful thing. Professor Hutchinson, Director of Policy for the ACLJ, that was quite a history lesson and quite a delivery last night.
Absolutely. And it is very consistent with the Republican approach to human rights and to civil rights vis-a-vis the Democrats' approach to civil rights. We should never forget that it was Woodrow Wilson who threw William Trotter, a civil rights activist, out of the White House. Why? Because he was standing up for African Americans in the United States. It was Woodrow Wilson who segregated the United States Civil Service Commission. It was Woodrow Wilson who basically reinstalled segregation in Washington, D.C. This is the consistent history of Democrats from Wilmington, North Carolina to Wilmington, Delaware. They have always been, in my judgment, on the wrong side of civil rights history.
You know, Andy, you teach history, and history is something that people sometimes either forget, ignore, or put it in their own perspective.
That's right, Jay. Mainly it's ignore history, and this is exactly what this man who suffered the hands of white supremacists in Greensboro, North Carolina, put back into perspective last night. Those who do not history are doomed to know history, and who ignore it are doomed to repeat it again. And he stated what the Republican Party has done for African Americans from the very beginning, and it is to stand up for them and for their liberties and for their rights. And here was a person who said he was a proud Republican and a supporter of President Trump, and he gave us a history lesson that we needed to know, that we needed not to ignore and not to forget, a history lesson that was very powerful and very powerfully put. I was so impressed with what he said and with what the other people of color on national television said at the Republican National Convention last night. It was a mesmerizing event. It was a tremendous production. It was awesome to hear from these people who were doing nothing more than telling the truth, Jay.
You know, we have an interesting call coming in from Dee in Delaware. It's Joe Biden's home state. Dee, welcome to Jay Sekulow Live. You're on the air.
Yes, how are you today?
We're good.
I just wanted to make a statement. You know, Joe Biden has always been on the wrong side of everything. I've never voted for him, even though I've been a lifelong Democrat. But what I've learned from watching the DNC's convention was a lot of doom, and it scared me because I have young children.
Yes, so do I.
But I watched the RNC, and it has been an awakening because what I'm hearing are things that never did we know. We weren't being told all the accomplishments that this president has done. I didn't vote for him in 2016, but I can tell you one thing. For the security of my children and my country, I will be voting for President Trump because I've watched over the 4 years and all of this negativity that keeps coming out. I'm like, wow, what kind of mistake have we made?
You know, and I think, Dee, you're like a lot of people. You're that silent majority they talk about, folks who might not even voted for him last time, but have seen this chaos that have happened. And take a listen. Laura Trump, Eric Trump's wife, she talked about it. She has a major role in the campaign. She's been very outspoken in the media and for the campaign's new kind of like virtual television network they do. Take a listen, because I think what you said is exactly what she was talking about. And I'm someone, too, with young kids. I mean, that's what's on the top of my mind all of the time. Byte 119.
We cannot dare to dream our biggest dreams for ourselves or for our children while consumed by worry about the safety of our families. President Trump is the law and order president, from our borders to our backyards. President Trump will keep America safe. President Trump will keep America prosperous. President Trump will keep America, America.
And that's so key to me, that my backyard's safe. Of course, for nationally, that our borders are secure, that we, that our economy stays on track, so it brings people out of poverty, and those who work hard are rewarded for that hard work, and innovators are rewarded for that innovation, and that we keep America, America. We're not Europe. We don't want to be like Europe. We don't want to be socialist democracies. We want to be America. And that statement, it sounds very simple, but keeping America, America is a real challenge and a real distinction between, Dad, when you have a party who on the one hand, and we'll talk about this more in the next segment, on the one hand, the Democrat Party in their platform said that they want to abolish all school choice programs. And every single night of the Republican National Convention, multiple speakers have talked about the need for the expansion and new innovation
which we've been
in
leading.
School choice policies. So there's a huge distinction right there for all the folks out there with young children or children in school, is that idea that the government wants to run everything in your life, and we don't even want to let you make any choices, or we want to think about how we can even let you make even more choices and have more flexibility. And to me, it's such a huge distinction.
Well, let me say this. You know, on this broadcast, we never tell you who to vote for. We give you the positions and you make a decision. But let me tell you about the school choice thing, because you mentioned that. That should not be a political issue. It is because of the teachers' unions. But if it's, we're talking about America first, if it's students first and their parents, this is a really easy decision. And I will say this. The ACLJ, when this pandemic hit, we have led the way on this. New contacts coming in, new requests for assistance every single day, and we're helping parents everywhere we can. Your support of the American Center for Law and Justice helps us keep this broadcast on the air. Your support of the American Center for Law and Justice allows us to bring you experts like former acting director of national intelligence, Ric Grenell, former ambassador to Germany, public policy director, Harry Hutchinson, senior counsel, Andy Economo, Colonel Wes Smith, Colonel Skip Ash. All of this because of your support of the ACLJ. If you're able, join us today, aclj.org.
All right, welcome back to Jay Sekulow Live. This is Jordan Sekulow. Of course, tonight, night 4, it's a big night for the president because this is when he addresses the nation. The final speech of the night will be from President Trump. Though he's made appearances throughout the convention, this will be a major speech and probably one of the most important speeches he'll ever give, because it's about why you should vote to re-elect him. Why should Americans vote to re-elect him as president? And so you've had all this build up to that. You'll have more build up tonight, more speakers tonight, and then it will be up to him. Now, this is in the midst of, there is a hurricane it's occurring, so there's that special unique balance there that I know everyone is looking out for to see the damage, and we'll report on that as that develops. Some of that, takes days to really figure out what the damage
How's
is.
the water rises, so
things like that.
We'll keep posted.
Of course, we're praying for people down there being affected right now, and those I know one loss of life already.
Yeah, let's take some calls.
Donna in New Jersey on line 1. Donna, welcome to Jay Sekulow Live.
Oh, thank you guys for taking my call. I just wanted to, at this point, add in my voice to everything that you have said. I found this convention so rousing and riveting. I'm hanging on to every word that everyone says. And we have learned so much that we didn't know about Donald Trump and about all his policies. And I just can't wait for the election to reelect Donald Trump as president. And I also wanted to thank Jay and his band for the other day for the Monkees rendition of I'm a Believer.
Yeah.
I love the Monkees, love that song.
You must be my age. I could tell. All right. I could tell. There's no question. You're from New Jersey. I'm from New York. We like the Monkees. I think we're going to do another Monkees tune, although we got 2 great tunes for you. By the way, the concert's Monday night at what time, Will? 8 o'clock? I believe 8 o'clock. I think it's 8 o'clock. And there's 4 newer tunes in there, and then we went to our archives and our vaults and pulled out some really great stuff you haven't seen in years. And listen, I appreciate your comments as well. I want to go to this one. I want to play Mike Pence, Vice President of the United States, powerful speech talking about foreign policy issues. And I want to get Harry and Andy's comments on that. Here we go, number 8.
Joe Biden criticized President Trump following those decisions to rid the world of 2 terrorist leaders. But it's not surprising, because history records that Joe Biden even opposed the operation that took down Osama bin Laden. It's no wonder that the Secretary of Defense under the Obama-Biden administration once said that Joe Biden has been, and I quote, wrong on nearly every major foreign policy and national security issue over the past 4 decades.
And that's why we're thrilled at the ACLJ to bring on as our special advisor Ric Grenell to deal with the issues of national security and foreign policy. But Harry, quickly, that was quite a statement coming from the vice president.
Absolutely. And Joe Biden cannot rebut that statement. And so Joe Biden has been wrong on virtually every foreign policy decision for the last 40 years. Meanwhile, President Trump has put America first. We have stood with our allies, and we have stood up to our enemies. We have moved the American embassy to Jerusalem, the capital of the state of Israel, and that has set the stage for the first Arab country to recognize Israel in 26 years. So President Trump is a doer. Vice President Biden is simply an individual who seems lost in space.
And I think when you compare the two, again, just look at one issue. We talked about Iran with Ric Grenell earlier, but he made this statement, about the differences in how they'd be approaching Iran. You talked about with the nuclear deal with Mike Pence talking about that. How about just with what's happened by the Trump administration? Remember, Ric Grenell talked a lot about we're not starting wars, we were ending wars. And how are we doing that? By strategically taking out Iranian terrorist leaders. So listen to this bite, though. I thought it was just very telling because it's absolutely true. Bite 64.
A return to the Biden way of thinking means America gives the radical terrorist regime in Tehran a plane load of cash in the middle of the night. Well, you see, President Trump also sent an aircraft in the middle of the night to deal with Iran. But that plane was on a different mission. An airstrike to take out the head of Iran's terror machine who plotted the deaths of Americans.
Heard a lot from Iran recently?
Yeah, not much.
You hear a lot of them. They're dealing with COVID crisis. No. Had heard a lot about their nuclear program? No. So think about that difference too. But there was more last night, Dad. Too. It was not just we keep getting back to issues that we really do focus in on the ACLJ with Iran foreign policy and of course these were the kind of main speakers and what Vice President Pence was talking about as well. But also I was encouraged that every night there's been a speaker who's been strongly pro-life.
Yeah, that is.
And last night it was Sister Byrne, and
unbelievable.
Just let's listen to her.
Yeah,
but it's just. I thought again,
refreshing.
It's a major contrast. The other side tried to hide they were pro-abortion last week. They never used the word abortion.
They had Planned Parenthood out there though.
They had the themes, but they never the other words other than abortion. Here's Sister Byrne.
Yep.
Keep in mind, the laws we create define how we see our humanity. And we must ask ourselves, what are we saying when we go into a womb and snuff out an innocent, powerless, voiceless life? As a physician, I can say without hesitation, life begins at conception. While what I have to say may be difficult for some to hear, I am saying it because I'm not just pro-life, I'm pro-eternal life, and I want all of us to end up in heaven together someday.
I'm going to go to Andy on this quickly, Jordan, because his text to me during that was unbelievable, pro-eternal life. Wow. Andy?
Yes, Jay, I was so taken by what Sister Deidre said, because she pulled out a rosary, and that's more than what we need today is more rosaries and less Joe Biden, who says he's a Catholic but does not believe in the sanctity of life. And when she said, I'm just not pro-life, I'm pro-eternal life, that's the fundamental Christian principle that we live with and that we die with, the day that we can see the glory of God in all its eternity and all its splendor. And those are the kinds of things that the president stands for.
You know, this nun was also served in our military for 29 years, Jordan. She was a surgeon in Afghanistan and Iraq, and then became a nun, dedicating her life to the sport of life.
Yep,
she has her entire career.
And this, again, they never shied away from that. The American dream, this idea that, we're never going to get back to what we had before. Elise Stefanik, the Congresswoman, too, the youngest elected woman in Congress, she talked about this, too. I think all of our callers thought about this. Yep. They want America to be America, not this socialist America, not riot America, not out of control America. Take a listen.
I believe in the American dream because I've lived it. Like millions of Americans, I grew up in a small business family where I learned the values of hard work and determination. I was the first person in my immediate family to graduate from college, ran for Congress to serve upstate New York, and am proudly the youngest Republican woman elected to Congress in history.
Let me say something here to our audience and our friends. First of all, thank you for your support of the ACLJ. It's keeping this broadcast on the air. It keeps our lawyers fighting for families around the country. It keeps us engaged in defending freedom, defending Israel in international tribunals. We couldn't do it without you. Keeps, as I said, brings you experts like Andy and Harry and Wes, Skip, and now former acting director of national intelligence, cabinet member Ric Grenell, former ambassador to Germany. We can do that only because of your support for the ACLJ. This is the last days of our Matching Challenge campaign. If you're able, I encourage you to go to aclj.org, especially if you enjoy the content we're able to provide for you. aclj.org.